So, there's a rumour doing the rounds that Napoli would like to buy Gianluca Scamacca. Normally, I would dismiss this. I wouldn't believe it. I might do a video about it, but I wouldn't necessarily believe it for a number of reasons, one of which we've just signed him. Secondly, it seems to be the case at the moment that a lot of the teams on the continent couldn't afford to buy players, particularly not premium players from the Premier League. I think, and then thirdly, it's just the association with a player leaving after a year, less than a year in this case. Apparently they want him in January. Just seems a little bit fanciful. There's a lot to disbelieve. Usually there's only one source as well for this information. However, there's a few things that have got me slightly concerned, or at least made it more believable. I say concerns, it depends where you stand on Scamacca, really. And there are so many variables in this, as I do believe that keeping Scamacca, and whether he thrives or flourishes, depends on who our manager is. So maybe if you believe we're going to keep David Moyes, then quite possibly, because he doesn't seem to be able to get the best out of him, it might be right for Scamacca to leave. We get a new manager in who plays for his strengths, might be right for Scamacca to stay. But there's an awful lot going on there. So we understand from the club that they want him. And there are a lot of pointers to suggest that this is definitely the case. Not only in their desire for the player, but actually, can they financially facilitate it? And the answer to both seems to be yes. We know Scamacca's got open line of communication to some favoured journalists over here, and it seems to be that there's a little bit of a suggestion that via his favourite channels that he wouldn't object to the move. Do you know what? I bet he bloody wouldn't. Why? Well, it's not really worked out for him thus far at West Ham. It's probably not been like it was sold to him in the brochure. And Napoli are top of Serie A and doing very, very well. Not only that, as I start to go through their team, you'll start to see there's a lot of players in that Napoli team that Gianluca Scamacca would probably like to play with. Now, if you pardon the expression. Now, listen, what we've got to do, I think we've got to separate a couple of these things here. So, let's have a look at what Gianluca Scamacca probably thought he was joining at West Ham. He thought he was joining a club in Europe. Well, that's true. We still are in Europe. And he scored very well and done very well in there. But we do know he turned down Paris Saint-Germain. I think the reason he done that is he probably looked and thought, Paris Saint-Germain, I might not play every game. West Ham, I'll play every game. And also, he's not adverse to going and living in different countries. Well, we know this. He's not just somebody who necessarily just wants to live in Italy. He was a PSV early on in his career. So I think, he certainly indicated that he wanted to come to London. His English ain't bad either. So he came over. However, what was he sold in terms of how the team would play? I would imagine it probably ain't like this. For Sassuolo, he plays next to a player called Raspadori. We'll get onto him in a second. But there was a lot of support. There were a lot of runners. And he just doesn't have that at West Ham. At West Ham, we do not play in the style that suits him. In many respects, when we've seen him sort of shooting on sight and things like that, it's almost been, I've thought, at least a case of, well, Scamacca's got to do it on his own because there ain't going to be too many people around to help him. There's been some fleeting glimpses when he has linked with Paqueta, but by and large, you have to say that whatever he was told, and I don't know what he was told, I can only guess, is come and join West Ham, don't join PSG. We're in Europe, we've qualified for Europe 2 seasons in a row, we're in it this season, we'll qualify again next season. You're going to be literally the cherry on the top of the cake. We'll score lots of goals. All this stuff, he was probably told all that, and he probably thought, you know what, okay, I'll go and join West Ham. Well, it ain't worked out like that. And if you look at it from his point of view, he may well be thinking, I wouldn't blame him if he was thinking, maybe I should have joined PSG. Now, it's also worth noting that Napoli are very, very different from the Napoli that there was last season. Napoli have improved massively. Anyone who's seen them play in the Champions League will know this. Now, I mentioned Raspadori earlier. Raspadori is now playing for Napoli. So it was his partner at club level before. Also, when England played Italy, it was Raspadori and Scamacca who played up front. It appears that may be the way that Roberto Mancini wants to go in terms of his Italian team. So maybe, just maybe, I don't know, I'm second guessing here, it might be advantageous for Scamacca in terms of his international ambitions to go and play for Napoli and play alongside Raspadori. But it's not just that. I mentioned Napoli are top of the league in Serie A by quite a few points as well when I checked. They've also got some wonderful, wonderful players there. Zielinski was a player that was coveted by David Moyes himself. They've got some excellent players there. We'll go through them in just a second. But let me just try and get my head around this name. Carlos Quelia. I think that's his name. He's the Georgian winger. He is absolutely brilliant. He's unplayable. At the moment, every time I've seen him, he looks like he could be the next one. You know, like the next Lionel Messi. Oh, well, it doesn't have not necessarily match his output, but let's say like Mo Salah was playing a couple of seasons ago. This guy is playing like that now. He looks like one of the best players in the world. I guess it will take time if he does that consistently over the next season or two. I think it'll certainly be in the running for those sort of honours. There's no doubt about that. Any striker would want to go and play alongside this guy, particularly when you've got someone like Zielinski playing behind you. I'll just run through a few of the other players because, you know, you'll recognise some of them. Anguissa plays there, Zielinski plays there, Ndombele plays there. But let's get to the point here. They also have a player there called Victor Osimhen. He's a striker. He is absolutely brilliant. I mean, he is brilliant. So, with Victor Osimhen, they don't need Scamacca. Aha, well, this is where it all becomes very, very interesting. Very interesting indeed, because it looks like they're about to sell him for 80 million, euros. I don't know whether it was 80 million pounds, whatever it is. Now, if they do that, they're armed with an awful lot of money. Under normal circumstances, I would say Napoli can't buy players off a Premier League team, not ones that cost mega bucks. But if Napoli have got 80 million, then they could get almost whatever striker they want. So I think we're in a position now whereby if Napoli came calling and said, actually, the guy we want is Scamacca, and there are reasons that I've just explained to believe that that would be the guy that they would go for, we'll give you your money back. I think it makes it very, very interesting for West Ham because this is not a guy that thrives under the system. He doesn't look happy. But the interesting thing is, what position will we be in January? So, as I can see, one of three things have happened. Either David Moyes is there and we're doing crap, and Scamacca hasn't got fit and firing yet, or David Moyes is here and we've done a lot better, and Scamacca is responsible for that and scoring goals, in which case we just can't sell him. Or another manager has come in, and then who knows what happens there. But I think you do have to factor in what the player feels and what the player thinks. And let's be honest, this wouldn't be the first time that a player has joined a club and then want to go back home pretty quickly. Not because I believe he's homesick on this one, but because he's probably totally fed up with the way West Ham is. West Ham is probably not the club he thought he was joining. And he probably looks at Napoli and thinks, wow, they're really building something special there. If you're Italian, who wouldn't want to go and be part of that? I think it's really interesting. And I think if that happens, and even if I were David Moyes and David Moyes had kept his job, so maybe out of Brentford, Arsenal and Leeds, maybe he's got 4 points and he's kept his job at this point. And if he's looking at that, he might be thinking, well, actually, and David Moyes would have to be honest with himself here and think, well, I can't get the best out of Scamacca. It's not really working for me. Then maybe, just maybe, he would think maybe that money is better spent going and buying a striker that would better suit my system. Maybe Armando Broja. That's slightly difficult. Broja has started the last couple of games with Chelsea, but I still don't feel that he is massively a part of Graham Potter's plans. Graham Potter's job itself is... I don't think it's under threat because they've just hired a load more staff from Brighton, but it won't carry on indefinitely if he can't win a succession of games. So I think it's very, very interesting. Also, I think when Aubameyang's fit, Aubameyang plays, I still get the impression that Broja is possibly the third choice there. But if David Moyes were to think that Broja suits his system more than Scamacca does, then there's a decision to be made there. There really is. And I think when you're looking at that, and you're looking at Scamacca's motivation, you're looking at David Moyes' motivation, the prospect of getting your money back may be tempting. I've done a few videos over the recent times on about the depreciation value of players. And as I mentioned, I think that is a worry when you're in form that you buy players for for a certain amount, and they're worth less, basically. And there's some where it doesn't matter. I mean, someone like Flynn Downs, you probably get your money back for him, and he'd probably go on to be worth more. And I mentioned Kehrer before at 10 million. It was a good one. Paqueta at 50 million. I'm not saying we should necessarily sell him or anything like that, but if we wanted to, we wouldn't get the 50 million back right now. That just wouldn't happen. And with Scamacca, I think the opportunity, if you believe you might have got a transfer wrong, I think there's anything wrong with Scamacca's ability. I think he's a really good player. But if what we're not going to do is play him in a 2, which is probably what he needs, or at least with players very close to him, then you're not getting the best out of him. The longer you play him for that, or play him in that system, the more his value depreciates. So it may well be, if Scamacca mirrored his form at the moment for the next 6 months, I think it's fair to say, come the end of the season, we wouldn't get £35 million for him. Sometimes mistakes are made, so there's an opportunity there to rectify that. I do wonder what they'll do. I really do. I think if it does happen, it's really important that we play hardball on this. We don't do what Ajax were able to do with Sebastian Haller and buy a £45 million player for 20 million. I think you have to treat Napoli as they are, which is a really, really good club. Club that's got Champions League money and possibly armed with 80 million for Victor Osimhen. I think that's really, really important. But I also think the other dynamic of this situation is that you may well have a player there in Scamacca who doesn't look particularly happy at the moment anyway. You may well find that all of a sudden he's jealous. He wants to play for Napoli, wants to play with these fine players and this supply line, which is going to be really exciting for him. And then he may well become resentful that he's at West Ham playing up on his own. Let's be fair, that's what happens at West Ham. He's up on his own. There are even attacking players in David Moyes' system who are asked to defend an awful lot. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how we come out the blocks when the Premier League resumes in a game against Arsenal on the 26th of December. Very interesting indeed, because I think the mood of the club can lift. And whilst it might be difficult to beat Arsenal, you don't know what the break is going to do for them. Maybe we beat Arsenal. Maybe we win our first 2 games out of blocks. Stranger things have happened. They really, really have. Although that would be quite a strange one, given David Moyes' record against those clubs. When I say those clubs, I mean the Sky Sports top 6, if you like. And it's going to be interesting.